I don't even remember I've got a physical body. I don't even remember that moments ago I was in physical pain. The silhouettes of four different beings, they feel more family to me than my own family. I've missed you so much, and it's so nice to be in your presence again. If I see you, that means something bad has happened, because it means that I'm dead or that I'm dying. And I managed to speak to them completely pain free.
Welcome, everyone, to Our Sliver of Time. My name is Dave Sledge, and today we have a very special guest, Vincent Ollivier, famously nicknamed the man who kept dying. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on, Vincent. How are you?
Hey, nice to meet you, Dave, and thank you very much for inviting me to be a guest on your channel. I love the name of the channel, by the way, I should say. Our Sliver of Time. I find it very fitting. And I'm good. It's Sunday afternoon as we are recording, and weekend time, a bit of relaxation.
Absolutely, man. And I appreciate the compliment as well. So, Vincent, we're going to get into your whole story. But if you don't mind, could we start off with your near-death experience and how this all kind of came to be in the first place?
Absolutely. So the near-death experience is my fifth encounter with death, and that's why I joked about the nickname "the man who kept dying" because I had four encounters with death in the first 17 years of my life. The near-death experience happened when I was in my 30s. It happened in January 2018. And just to give you a bit of context at the time, it happened on a Sunday morning. To really tell the story, I have to take you back to the Thursday of that same week in the evening. And we are sitting at a restaurant, my wife and I, and it's a time in life where things are really busy for me. They're busy professionally, and I'm not really happy about my professional situation. I'm considering a potential career change and going from kind of a marketing data career into the medical field. And also I'm quite busy. So I'm studying in the evening, I'm studying over the weekends. I'm having a full-time day job that is quite demanding and puts a lot of stress on me. So I'm at a moment in my life when I'm really assessing what to do. And I have the deep, deep desire to press pause with life because I feel everything's going too fast and if anything, not in the right direction. So the reason why we're at the restaurant with my wife is because she has concerns too. And she has concerns that I'm doing too much, that it's not going to work out okay. And potentially that's putting a lot of strain on her shoulders too. And whilst we're having that conversation, I start to feel a really, really painful sensation that I could only compare to like a stabbing sensation on my right side, on my right flank. And it comes like very suddenly. It's very sharp. And I'm thinking, well, that's your body showing you, you're under too much stress. As simple as that. And even your digestion now is starting to be impacted. So you should just relax. We managed to finish the meal, but I feel like the pain still stays. And I'm like, I'm not really feeling comfortable with it. I don't know why it's happening, but it's nothing I've ever felt before. And usually I would say, okay, I could have a bit of a being upset, from a stomach standpoint or digestive standpoint. But this time it feels really different. We get back home. I can't really sleep through the night because I keep being woken up by the pain. And the pain, if anything, goes in cycles. And the cycles, they keep increasing the degree of pain each and every hour. So by the early hours of the Thursday night, so Friday morning by now, we call the emergency services. At the time, I was living in the United Kingdom, and after a bit of a conversation, they advised that I'm being checked in the nearest hospital. So I do have like a doctor's appointment. I go there, and the doctor basically very quickly rules out that, well, you've just had indigestion. You had like uh, Thai food the night before, and nothing wrong with Thai food, by the way. I love it. But actually, I should say I've never been able to have Thai food again since that episode, which is really strange. It's like an emotional blockage, but nothing wrong with Thai food at all. And but she says, you've just had indigestion. Uh, Go back home. Keep monitoring yourself. If you don't get better, yes, call us back. And it's true, she gives me some medication, I vomit, and right away I feel better. So to me, it's perfectly logical. I just had like some food poisoning, something was not right. You add the stress to that, perfectly, the explanation is perfectly logical and acceptable. So I get back home, I can't go to work. I'm just in too much physical pain. I'm like, I'm just going to rest. But the pain doesn't subside. Actually, if anything, it comes back. And if Friday was a bit of a respite, it comes back in the evening, and Saturday even more painful. And I remember through this whole period of time saying quite regularly, I'm dying. I feel like I'm dying. And for me, it was really like my body's failing me. There's something that I cannot understand. And it's one of the worst sensation in life is to have physical pain and nobody is able to explain to you why you have that physical pain. So the brain is actually, trying to compute what's happening. Anyway, fast forward to Sunday morning. My health state is not improving in the slightest. If anything, I'm getting worse and worse. So we call the emergency services again. This time, they decide that they will send an ambulance to my place, which they do. And maybe half an hour later, at the latest, I do have a paramedic uh, on his own. Normally they come in pair, but this time he was just on his own. And I'm downstairs, I'm laying on the sofa, and still like crippled by pain. He runs me through like a questionnaire. And at that time, I start to get really upset because I've answered the same questions for the third time, and yet he has to ask me the exact same questions again. When did your symptoms start? Blah, blah, blah. Do you have any blood pressure? Whatever. I'm like, I'm in perfectly good physical health. There's no reason for me to understand what is happening right now. He says, well, because you've been under so much pain for quite a few days, I'm going to inject to you through IV some painkillers. So put the needles in my wrist. I start to have, and I always describe it the exact same way because this is what it felt like. Uh, when you've got this really warm fluid that is trickling down your veins, it's really not nice, and you feel like it's really taking over your body. I'm not really sure it has any effect because I still like feel all the pain. He says, "Don't worry, it takes a few minutes to kick in, but to help you relax faster." Here's like some medical gases and he gives me a mask and he instructs me to take a couple of deep breaths with that. And he says that should help you to relax. And as I do so, he turns his back, keeps writing notes, completing his questionnaire. My wife is nearby and I take one deep breath, a second one, and I'm not in my living room anymore. I'm floating in a dark void and there's nothing around me. And I'm not even realizing that I've switched place. All of a sudden, for me, it's like, okay, I'm there. What am I doing there? I'm not sure. I don't even remember I've got a physical body. I don't even remember that moments ago I was in physical pain. It's like I remember nothing. My memory is almost blank. I'm just there, present moment, floating in that dark void. There's nothing around me. And if anything, it's like there's not even like great deal of physical sensations. It feels just not warm, not cold. It just feels like very neutral in every possible sense. After I don't know how long, because I seem to be just floating there and enjoying that moment of respite, I see, I describe it always the same way, but again, that's what it was, a tiny speck of light. So that little dot of light in white, pure white light in the distance. And as soon as I look at it, and I know you've described it too in, I was, listening to you to some videos on your channel by your own Andy. Uh, it's stereotypical in a way, but it seems to be so prevalent in so many near-death experiences. But then I see the light, and I think there's nothing else to look around. And as soon as I look at it, it grows bigger, and it feels like I'm going towards it at the speed of light. And as you say, whether it's you really me going towards it, or it coming towards me, or us meeting halfway, that's a good question. I really feel it's me going towards it, and it's growing super fast, like in an instant. And what I do see within that perfect sphere of light are the silhouettes of four different beings. And I can't see the face. I can't see what they look like. I can't see how they're dressed. I just see sort of the body shape. And I distinguish three of them are roughly the same size. And there's one that is quite taller, standing more in the background. And what really hits me at that moment is they feel more family to me than my own family. And to me, it's like, well, I know who you are. And despite the fact that I cannot see them, or perhaps I cannot remember them from that experience, and I did see them at the time, but my only memory is not being able to see them, but knowing that I knew them and knowing that having that family link, like the I've missed you so much, and it's so nice to be in your presence again. But when I feel that, at the exact same time, the memory of my wife comes to mind, and I'm thinking, hang on a second, if I see you, that means something bad has happened because it means that I'm dead or that I'm dying or I'm in the process of dying, and that's not good. And I've got this moment of absolute panic. And I said to them, I don't want to die. I really don't want to die. For me, it was like, I'm too young. I still have so much to do in life. There's no reason for me to die right now. There's a mistake. There must have been a mistake somewhere. I should not be there. And I managed to speak to them for the first time. And what I say is, no fucking way. Pas maintenant. Pas maintenant is French and it translates to not now. So basically, no effing way, not now. I'm too young, don't want that to happen. And instantaneously, it's like you know, they nod and they're like, okay, whatever. I'm being sucked away from the light and back into my body. At that moment, for me, it feels like opening my eyes again and realizing that I'm in my living room. I've dropped the mask. I look around quite confused. My wife is tapping my shoulder and saying, like, are you okay? Are you okay? I look at her and say, yes. The first thing I do, almost in a scientific manner, is I'm like, I don't understand what is happening. So I grab the mask again, put it, and try to take a couple of deep breaths. Because I'm like, if it's just the hallucination and I've just hallucinated what has just happened, it's going to happen again quite quickly. I'm going to feel like dizzy, whatever. Nothing happens. A couple of seconds later, the pain, the physical pain comes back and cripples my body again. And at that moment, I realized that where I was a few seconds before was actually in a completely different place in which I was completely pain free. And I have a regret. That specific moment, I actually regret that I decided to come back because I had forgotten about the physical pain. I had forgotten about the emotional pain. And I'm really thinking, what's ahead of me? Uh, do I have to go to the hospital? Do you have to be, do I have to have surgery? Am I going to survive it? Or is it going to be complicated? And yet at the same time, I do have that very calm inner knowing that everything's going to be okay. Like, you said you wanted to come back. You come back for a reason. And it's not you know, to have a life of misery or to suffer again. Yet, you're in the midst of physical pain, and there's nothing more difficult than having a high degree of physical pain because your brain cannot think straight and so on. The paramedic at that moment, he had not noticed anything happening, and he turns back to me and he says, "Well, listen, we have to take you to the hospital. It's quite urgent. Your health situation. We have to look after you." So I'm going to fast forward the story of the hospital, but basically, very quickly, they do a few checks. They run out they diagnosed that it was the complication from a surgery that I've had like 24 years prior, which was simply the removal of my appendix, and that had never healed properly. And basically, I had scar tissues inside my abdomen wall, and over time, this has created some friction, so my bowel could not sort of like slide normally inside the body, and they got stuck, and that created that situation, which is quite complex to go through. And they say, well, you have two ways to go about it. We can either have surgery or we can give you like medication and try non invasive methods first. And of course, I'm like, I don't want to have surgery. I've had a few brushes with death already, so I'm like, I have enough scars on my body, if you like. I don't need any more surgery in my life. Let's try anything non-invasive. One thing that is quite interesting through that story, which I appreciate, maybe a bit long, is on the Sunday afternoon, a surgeon came into the room I was in, and he offered right away to do surgery on me. And I remember absolutely disliking his energy, first of all, and having that voice in my head that was saying, don't accept, say no. And could call it an intuition. It really felt like really like a strong pressure to say no. I still remember like, exchanging looks with my wife and thinking she wasn't feeling it either. And no disrespect, but we used to call him the psychopath because he really had a psychotic look in his eyes. And I really felt like it would be very dangerous to go with him. The day after, a consultant came in and said, well, it's a good thing you did not have surgery because, you would have died on the operating table. Basically, your body fluids are all over the place. First of all, we need to stabilize you. Then we will try the non-invasive method. And if nothing, works, then we'll have to have surgery on you. And I'm thinking like, how do you have people looking after your health in such situation that actually could, end your life? A couple of days later, there was another surgeon. I had no option but to undergo surgery. And with this surgeon, we really, really gelled. He understood that I was quite young and fit. And after the surgery, I remember we had a conversation and he said, listen, I really wanted to do more on your body. But I remember that we've had a conversation before and you told me I'm young, I'm fit, just do the bare minimum for me to be okay in life and not have any further complications. He says, so I resisted the temptation to do more. And basically, I'm sure you're young and fit, as you said, you'll get back to speed very quickly. And from there on, it's a long recovery process. The interesting bit of that story, perhaps, is that I completely forgot about the ND. Once, past the surgery, I had to focus so much on my physical rehab because it takes about 18 months to physically fully recover. The first 6 months are quite, they get you probably to 80% recovery. And then you have another 6 months, 10%, and the last 10%, another 6 months. So you have to be really diligent with all the exercises and, the type of food you're having, that sort of things. Which I was, and thank God, because today I've got like absolutely, I mean, you would walk past me in the street and you wouldn't know. Focusing so much on that sort of mental and physical and emotional rehab, I had completely forgotten about the near-death experience. The memory of it only came back in September of the same year through an article that my mom actually sent me. And it was a magazine article about hypnosis and regression hypnosis. It was about a doctor, a French doctor, who, whose name is Jean-Jacques Charbonnier, if anyone is wondering. Just look it up. He is fascinated by near-death experiences. And he was just like documenting everything. And he had partnered with a hypnotherapist to create a method that would sort of take you to the ND stage or OB stage, one or the other, because I don't recommend a near-death experience to anyone. It means your life is in a pretty darn serious condition, and it's not. Don't do it, basically. But essentially, what he had created this protocol that would take people into a hypnosis state, and they would they would have the exact same experiences as during near-death experiences. And as I was reading the article and how the writer of the article was going through the light, meeting people, and so on, I was just thinking like it's so reminiscent of an experience I've had, but I just cannot put my finger on it. And when I got to the end of the article, the memory just came back to me. I was thinking maybe it's just a hallucination. Still. So I went to my wife in the evening and I said, hey, that morning of January before I was rushed to the hospital and we had the paramedic in the house, did something strange happen? And I remember her face went really pale and she says, why are you asking? So, well, listen, at one point I've lost consciousness. I was elsewhere. I've never said it to you. But when I sort of woke up or came back, you were, you know, touching my shoulder and you look very alarmed. So what happened? She says, well, I've never said it to you, but I thought you had died. Basically, you had dropped the masks, the paramedic had not noticed, you looked completely lifeless. She said, I've seen someone passing out. It's different. There for you, there was just no life in your eyes. And I completely panicked because I thought like that's it, pain was too much, you had just died. That's why I went and I touched your shoulder, and it's sort of like very quickly you came back to life and you looked very confused. So I proceeded to tell her what I had seen on my end. And what was quite interesting is that the process for her took like no more than a couple of seconds, maybe 2 to 3 seconds. Whereas for me, maybe 1 to 2 to 3 minutes at max. So there was also like not the same correlation of time for the two of us. So that's the story of the ND. But as soon as she confirmed it to me, it was very important because it felt like there was a witness to what had happened, and it was just not a hallucination. Also, at that very moment, the weight of always fearing death, for me, completely evaporated. It's like a weight was lifted off my shoulders instantaneously. And I've never had any fear of death ever since. Although I appreciate the story of the NDE is quite simple and basic. I think we all get to experience what we need to experience in that moment. For me, it certainly alleviated the fear of death.
When you were on the other side, you said that you saw four beings that you could remember them like it felt like they were family in a way. My question for you is, do you believe that we all have this type of, family on the other side?
That's a very good question. I would say yes, because I have to add a bit of a backstory to the four beings. I got a chance to see who they are 6 years later. I still cannot establish what the relationship between me and them is. I'm quite a lucid dreamer. I'm very aware when I'm dreaming, but this felt more like an out of body experience. All the only difference with DOB is that I didn't consciously feel myself leaving my body, but basically I find myself in a place. I'm standing in the middle of a street of a village that looks like a village in the Cotswolds in South England, like very quaint villages with like stone properties and so on. And there's nobody. I'm at the intersection of two roads. There are no cars. It's like it's empty, but at the same time, I'm like, I know I'm about to surprise people. So I'm standing there and I do have like a lot of physical sensation. That's why I liken it to an out of body experience because I can feel, it's like I can feel the temperature. It's like I can feel the ground under my feet and all those things. And I hear a voice from my left that says, Vincent, is that you? And I just turn around and I see a woman around 30 years old, like blonde woman, curly hair, and she's dressed quite in quite a modern way. Like she's got like a pair of blue jeans, white sneakers, and uh, and a white top, and she looks like completely amazed that I'm here. And she runs towards me, and she gives me like a big hug, a big embrace, and she just looks at me completely with eyes completely marveling. I says, "What are you doing here?" And another voice just comes and says, Is Vincent here?" And again, another woman comes in, and this time she's a bit smaller, and she comes around like, what are you doing here? And I just smile. I don't even know what to say because, to be honest, I don't even know why I'm here. I just know I'm here to surprise them. And a third woman comes. The reason why I'm detailing all this is quite important. Remember the four beings in the during the NDE. A third woman comes. This time she's got dark hair and she's dressed like with a kind of a dark red hoodie and again very 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 modern. And they all look like in their 30s. And same thing, she gives me like a hug and she looks at me and she says like, "Oh, it's been a long time we haven't seen you there." And for some reason I reply, "Well, I was there in April 2023, but you were not there." She pauses, seems to think, just says, "Oh, yeah, well, we were busy somewhere else, so if you'd come here, there would have been nobody around." What I shall say is this dream happened on the night of the 11th of November 2023, just a few months ago. Some people talk about the 11/11 portal, and perhaps there was something for me because I've never had that type of dream before. But as I'm looking at those three women, and they're all standing in a specific order, from left to right, they're all smiling at me. I'm smiling at them, and I feel the exact same connection than with the beings I saw during the near death experience. And at that moment, I understand that this is them. However, I'm still completely incapable during that moment to tell you what my relationship with them is until in the village comes a group of villagers, and none of them is particularly reminds me of anything except for one person. There's a very tall man. When I say tall, I mean he's like 7 something feet tall because I'm 6'4" and he's like literally towering me by a good head. And right away I recognize him. And I'm like, oh, well, I know you. And he says hi, and we joke because he's got like a very bushy beard. And I'm like, oh, I should give you advice how to trim it. And because you don't, you could do a bit better in terms of how you look. And the connection I had with that specific man, I remember, was through a lot of other dreams in which we're going through kind of the end of times. Like there's about to be a big cataclysm, a natural catastrophe on the planet. Very often it has to do with water levels rising very fast. And we try to tell as many people as we can to get to a higher place, to try to anticipate what's about to come. And very often we only succeed with like a handful of people. Many people are just going about their business. They don't really care. Once the catastrophe has passed, with a group of people, we always go and try to find other survivors and rebuild. And that's where I feel like the connection was instantly. I remember that. And with the woman, I could not really tell exactly, have we been family in what we called past lives? Or are they just guides? Or is it just like a family on the other side and more like a soul family and we just know each other and we've been following each other for ages? I do not have the answer to that question. One hypothesis I have about it is on my father's side. I had a grandmother. She had two sisters and a brother. That makes four people too. So it could be that is that, but I definitely felt the four people I saw during the ND that I could not see the face and so on. There during the that night and that lucid dream slash OB, these were these people. So I know what they look like. I still cannot, and I wish I could tell you the relationship I have with them. I really wish, but to this day I cannot. And I can only have like potential ways of, the relationship we have. But coming back to your question, yes, I would say certainly we do have families. Certainly we do have other souls or spirits, however you want to label it. And I'm sure we go from experience to experience, what we may label as lifetime to lifetime, trying different roles, trying different scenarios together and just seeing how it pans out.
Do you believe there's a reason that we come to Earth? Is this a choice that we're making, in your opinion?
Well, yes, I would say so. I mean, we're here. So to start with, sometimes, I would ask myself, especially when I was younger, like, what's the point of life? Why are we here? And especially when I did not like the experience, when you have negative experiences, you just go through it and you're thinking, what's the point of all that? But when I was a kid, I was really, really thinking there is something else. We must be there for a reason, whether it's a choice we made and we don't recall, or whether we're just here and we go through the experience. I was always, always questioning that. When I got closer to the NDE, I had completely stopped believing in the possibility of, the afterlife, the metaphysical, the spirit side. I was like, you know what, you die and that's it. Nothing happens. Deep down, that was making me really sad. And in a way, the NDE was a good reminder that no, there is something else. I'm convinced of that because even though I was, I had left my physical body, I was still conscious. So my consciousness had sort of like completely changed state. And to me, it became possible to really accept that consciousness would just move through different levels. And yes, today I'm sharing this story. and we're having this podcast. And my name is Vincent. I identified as Vincent or Vincent in English, and this is my persona, so to speak, or my personality. But before that, was I really Vincent, or was I, what we could label the soul? And did I know more because I've had other lives, and so on? It's very possible. I remember once in meditation after the ND, because once I'd remembered the ND, I really went on a journey to try to understand consciousness. So I read many books, I read many articles, I watched many videos, I did hypnosis sessions, and so on. And I remember once asking a question in meditation, and it was about how many lives I've lived on this planet. Because to me, I still feel like a newbie. It feels like there are some. I still have that naivety in me that's very raw. Like I believe everyone is a good person at heart, and it's only circumstances and conditions and education that are sometimes making us react in a bad way. And the answer that came back to me was like 1,156 lives, and that's your 1,157th lifetime on the planet. I was just like, that's a lot. What have I learned? Like, it seems like I've learned nothing. And then there is that, notion of forgetfulness. You come back potentially, or you come for the first time, but you don't remember that more spiritual aspect of yourself or the other side where, you've left your family and all those things. And I had a problem with that for quite a long while because I was thinking, why don't we remember? Because it would be very useful at times just to know there's something else existing. At least, just like with the NDE, you don't fear death. It's like, okay, I know there's something happening. I can just get on with my life and, be the best person I can be um, for people around myself and so on. Why do we forget? And as time passed, I've come to accept that actually it plays a big part in the game. It's like, going on a stage and acting a role, but you're acting it so well that at times you'll forget that you're on stage and it's just a play. Uh, Yet, I will, there are degrees and degrees to that because if I'm a bit more serious for a second, I would say, when you get to experience physical violence, emotional violence, and suffering and pain, it's not really pleasant. So I think we get at a stage where collectively we're starting to get really tired of playing the game that way, and potentially the game is about to change.
When you say that you were told you lived 1,100 lives and you made the comment that, well, what have I learned, right? Because you still have a little bit of naivety. That actually brings me to another question. Oftentimes people say when they go to the other side, they don't remember the life they were just living. And it seems like vice versa. If we don't remember where we came from when we enter into this kind of physical realm, my question to you is, do you believe we come in here as a blank slate every single time, or do we come with like a baseline, like reference point of the lessons we learned prior, or do they stay on the other side?
It's a very interesting question, and I would say it's not black or white. It's probably very much tailored to what you desire to experience. And I know some people have likened, the life experience as a dream, just like when, you go into dream state and you go into a dream, and when you wake up in the morning, you're back, in your bed and going, saying, okay, right, new day on the planet. What do I have to do today? Um, and they say you could just reverse that, and basically the day you die, it's just like waking up from a dream and saying, "Oh, it was just a dream after all. I'm back to my reality." Um, the To me, I think it depends on what we desire to experience, and I don't think we come back with a full clean slate because sometimes we might have things we've accumulated in different experiences that we want to take with us, and other times we might just say, actually, I don't need that, or I don't wish to have that. I want to learn it again, but from a different viewpoint. Or I want to go through that experience, but this time I will equip myself with this and this and that as sort of knowledge. And I think it comes back to, some people, like it's not the case for me, but um, people who are born to be musicians, like they can play the violin at 3 years old and or they can play the piano at 5 years old, like complete maestros. Uh, I think there are some people who know exactly what they want and they come in with that specific intent. It's very clear. and they probably make all the right choices very early in life, the right family, the right environment for them to harness that desire. But you could also have the musician who says, not that I want to be a bit more of a tortured artist, but I want to go in a family that will just despise music. But I want to find that ability to love music through the fact that I would have never been authorized to be a musician. And, maybe later in life, they say, actually, I've got all these musical abilities. Now I'm going to really make the most out of them. And the backstory for them would be like, in my family, I could never afford to play music, or my parents never liked the sound of music. So, they were never listening to music, never allowing me to play any instrument whatsoever. It depends. You probably have to feel yourself, and it's individual to and down to each and every person to feel, at least in my opinion, what it would be for you.
After a near-death experience like this, how has this changed kind of the way you live your life or your perception on life as a whole?
First of all, the fear of death being removed was one of the main ones in my life. Because before then, as I've mentioned, and I'm sure we'll touch upon that a bit later in the podcast, but yeah, I had like quite a few encounters with death, to the point I was believing death was chasing me, and I didn't like that. So even, until I remember the NDE after the surgery, I was like, it could happen again. Why is this happening, and why is my life like always like that? And but what really changed once I remember the near-death experience? Yes, death, not fearing it again, but also all the research I did trying to understand the other side. What is it like? And there is so much information out there, and it's taken me quite a few years to get to a platform to which I could almost tell you now, um, that I've understood enough to, in a way, not really have a desire to share it with everyone, because I think it becomes a personal journey after a while, and you've got your own understanding. If anything, what has allowed me is to very much be in the present moment, and realizing that I used to worry so much about the future, or I used, to dwell on the past. Oh, if I had done it that way, what would be the future now? What would be the present, and this and that? Or, something's going to happen in 2 days, and stressing myself about, if the person says that, I need to reply this. And, trying to have all these imaginary conversations in my mind. And of course, they never happen the way you envisage them to be. A person's going to say something completely different that's going to throw you completely off piste, and you'll be like, wow, how do I deal with it now? So I've really learned to be in the present moment, and I've really learned to trust life. It's that utmost trust that things always work out. Even if you're in a negative situation or you find yourself in an emotionally charged moment, I have the confidence that, okay, it's going to work out okay. You might not know, you might not know how exactly, but eventually, like a few months later, you will look back and say, oh, this happened for that reason. Now I'm connecting the dots. And I've seen so many instances of that in my life since I've got that approach, that sometimes it's like things are not happening, you feel like being stuck in a rut, and all of a sudden there's just like all doors open on the same day or on the same week. And it's like kind of magical. And you think like, well, did I really do a good job of enjoying the moment when things were a bit quieter or perhaps not going my way? Or did I just, shift my focus onto, well, actually drop it. It's no big deal. Things will come. And of course, when I say that, I'm very aware, you have to be active in life. If you stay in your bedroom and you don't do anything, life's not going to happen to you. You have to go outside, you have to reach out to people, you have to have a degree of activity for things to happen. But you can notice, or I certainly do in my case, that there are times where, yeah, absolutely, everything seems to be like perfectly aligned. And there are times where you just look at the road and you're just scratching your head thinking, I don't get it. But I've learned to really relax when those moments do happen. And I've learned to really take a step back and say, okay, how can I be the best version of myself?
You certainly don't want to be a feather in the wind. I believe it requires your active and intentional participation. But to your point, there's certain things you just can't possibly plan for. So it seems to be a degree of both. When you say that you felt as though death was chasing you prior to your actual near-death experience, what exactly do you mean by this?
By this, I mean that I should not even be there talking to you. So, and that's quite a miracle that I'm still here. And as I said earlier, if you were to walk past me in the street, you would have no idea on, the fact that I've got like many scars on my body and so on. But I guess it's the case for many people. I'm not a special isolated case. There are people who have gone through more difficult situation and people through easier situations too. But when I was a month old, my parents had a car accident and they were on their way to go to their parents. So I was about to meet my grandparents for the first time. And you have to think about the early 80s. Child safety and car safety wasn't like what it is today. And basically, when they had the accident, everyone was fine, thankfully, but I just flew around the car because I had no seat belt on whatsoever. And it's kind of a miracle that I was not hurt. Yet at the same time, I'm very aware, babies are we're quite malleable when we are very young because not all the bones are formed. But so I don't have any recollection of that, of course. But I think it informed a bit of the idea from a very young age that death was something real, and that it could happen anytime, any moment. Then I grew up in Africa too, and there were quite a few dangerous animals, and at times not the most stable of geopolitical situation. So I guess I was aware of that from a young age too, although very, as I said, a bit of a naivety towards it, like, just enjoying life in nature, that's great. Um, and around the age of 10, I had two back-to-back surgeries and still really unexplained why and how it happened. But yeah, I had my appendix removed and I had sort of a brain tumor removed too, around the same, like a few weeks interval from one another. And the brain tumor had left me half paralyzed uh, for a few days. So basically, I could not stand. I would just flop completely from one side. So I was taken just right in time. And again, like, no complexities or, no subsequent problems aside from, many years down the line. But I didn't know I was living with a ticking bomb inside me at the time. But again, everything was fine, able to live an absolutely normal life. And at the age of 17, fourth encounter with death. This time it was a car accident. Again, I was a passenger and the driver just lost control of the car and we hit like the side of the road. I took the bear of the brunt of the impact. Sorry. Basically, I just remember at that very precise moment. That's the one that has marked me the most. That I'm going to die. There's no way I'm going to survive that impact. We're carrying way too much speed. The impact is going to be way too violent, and I'm going to bear the full brunt of the impact is going to be where I sit. I was the front passenger. I just remember everything going blank before it happened, as if to avoid, the physical pain of being squashed in a car. And what happened is the car, yeah, hit the side of the road, flipped on its roof, went to the other side of the road. I don't remember any of what has happened afterwards, although people in the car with me did tell me what had happened, but I don't remember much of it. Apparently, I was a bit mad at the driver and I wanted to fight him. We were three in the car, and the three of us were absolutely okay, bar a few scratches when we got out of the car from shattered glass and so on. I just remember opening my eyes and laying down on the side of the road and not understanding where I was, looking at, absolute azure blue sky, thinking it must be summertime. Why am I not waking up in my bed? Where am I? And there was a firefighter that came in because it happened in France, and emergency services would be firefighters coming first to the scene. And he asked me like quick fire question, what's your name? Where are you? What day of the week are we? I remember being able to answer those questions one after the other and thinking, for example, answering like, oh, we're Wednesday. I'd be like, how do I know it's Wednesday? I've got no, I've got no proof it is Wednesday, but I'm sort of blurting out those answers very quickly. And location and so on. I was like, hey, maybe we're there. Until I understood and I computed. Yeah, just had a car accident. With the car accident, what was really most striking to me is I saw the pictures after the accident of the car. It was a complete wreck, and where I was sitting was completely flattened. So from bonnet to roof was completely flattened. And I was thinking, there's no way I've survived that, being squashed in that accident. And again, I was 17 years old. The car was like, did not have like many, you know, car safety equipment. Uh, so basically, like no airbags, none of those sorts of things. And I remember having a conversation with one of my grandmothers, and I know I share it very often because it really has stayed with me, this conversation. I was between 18 and 20 and always had a great relationship with people in my family and more specifically my grandparents. And with my grandmother, I told her, I say, I know there are people who go through a lot more in life in terms of ordeals. I know people die for a lot less too. But why is it that I'm still alive after everything that has happened to me? And not that I'm special in any case, but just trying to understand why is death or constantly on my back, constantly sending me a reminder that, I'm there, I can make you die anytime, but I'm not going to make you die. I'm going to make you go through those experiences and you realize that, I'm always present. I was like, that's kind of, being sadistic there because it's like, I really feel like it's there. And, at times it really, really questions me. She kind of like dismissed my comment by saying very lovingly, well, that's because you have not done what you came here to do. Otherwise, you would have gone. And the fact that, you're surviving all this is because there's something that you must do and you've yet to do it. So I replied, what is it I have to do according to you? And she was very, very kind because she said, smiling, it can be as simple as, meeting the love of your life, having kids, just leading your life, but making a difference to people around you. It doesn't have to be anything grand, it can just be leading a normal life. And just by doing so, you're important. So I remember thinking, okay, that's good. But that did not really truly alleviate the fear of death. It was still there until, yeah, the fifth encounter that led to the near death experience. From there on, really, the fear of death completely removed. Actually, I would even say that I have the belief that we we create our own encounters with death, and maybe there are points in times where we just want to exit, and it's possible for us to do so. Um, Although time is quite a topic in itself, but I think it's possible. And perhaps the life experience of going through death or encountering death multiple times for me was simply to get a better experience and a better understanding of life itself. As simple as that.
If you could ask one question to the person watching this video right now, what would it be?
Good question. But I guess I would go with my heart. What my heart would say, and I was going through the sort of the phases of, are you happy? Do you live in joy? But I guess ultimately is, are you loving yourself?
For the people out there that might still have a fear of death to a certain degree, what kind of advice could you give to the person watching this video who might be on their spiritual journey or in their kind of like quest to find the truth? Is there anything you could say to them to kind of help alleviate that fear?
The first thing I would say is it's perfectly normal to have a fear of death. Because even if today I will tell you, well, I understand that death is a transition, and through my own experiences, um, you know, I know that your consciousness survives your physical body, so there's no need to fear that. However, I'm very, very aware that if you die, from a health issue, it can be physically painful. If you have an accident, it can be physically painful. If there is, a notion of depression or mental health, it can be mentally painful too. So all these things I'm perfectly aware, it's not like airy fairy and I'm not putting on rose tinted glasses when I say so that, don't fear death. Um, really, really, what I would say to people is just really know and deep down in your heart that your consciousness will survive you. And once, when I was on the other side temporarily, I was completely bereft of physical pain. And I think that's the most important. Even if you have to go through physical pain, you know that once you get to the other side, you don't feel that physical pain anymore. It's not an easy question to answer because I know, like, for some people it can still be like, yes, it's not as easy as saying I'm going to pop out of my body now. Boom. Which I'm sure, some people to a certain degree of what they call enlightenment or consciousness, it's doable. I'm absolutely of the belief that it is, but it's not the way we go through it. The majority of people, anyways, appreciate appreciate that degree of humanness I have to mention in my answer.
My understanding is that your novel that is sitting right behind you on the shelf there is inspired by all of these events, your near-death experience, etc. Where can people find this book, and where can people find you in other places if they want to get in contact and kind of listen to your content as well?
Well, sure. Well, thank you for mentioning the book there. It is indeed a novel that I wrote following the remembrance of the NDE. And I always had, since I was a teenager, this idea that one day I would be writing a book. And for some reason, it would be inspired by events that have taken place in my life. I've always thought it would happen when I'm quite old and I've lived a lot. Um, but after the NDE, I just decided that I would write it in my free time. So it's uh, it's what I did, and indeed, it is inspired by the events that have taken place in my life. The car accident I was mentioning, for example, is a full chapter in the book, and it's about a character who finds himself on the other side. And really, the exercise I did through that book was to answer the question: what if I had gone through the light and met with the four beings during my near-death experience? What would they have taught me? What would they have explained to me? What would they have shared with me? And through my understanding of, the spirit side, the metaphysical, I'm just compiling that sort of like adventure to the other side through the main character. So that's the novel. You can find it on Amazon. Just check, The Man Who Kept Dying, Vincent Ollivier on Amazon. I will say it's been reviewed by professional editors too, so the English should be up to par with, good standards. And you can also find me on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel in which I explore some metaphysical concepts that I'm describing in the book, in which I will give you some chapter in depth about the real story behind the chapter in the book. And you can also find me on Instagram, and same handle there, the man who kept dying, Vincent Ollivier. And I tend to be a bit more active on YouTube than I am on Instagram, if I'm honest. But you can see two different versions of me.
We will, of course, put the links to your book and all of your pages in the description. So anyone who is still watching, you can check the description and find him below. Um, Vincent, thank you so much for coming on, man. Has been an absolute pleasure. So I really appreciate it, and I hope you had some fun as well.
Well, thank you for having me. And indeed, it was a great conversation to have. And yeah, thank you as well for your excellent questions, because it really, yeah, was slightly different from other interviews I've done, and I really enjoyed that moment.
The pleasure's all mine. So who knows, maybe we'll speak again in the future. To everyone watching, thank you so much for being here. This has been our sliver of time. Thank you so much for yours. Um, and you will hear back from both of us soon. Take care, everyone.
Bye.